His name was Paul. He was a human. And he arrived at the Alliance base without speaking much. Carrying a small duffel bag and wearing an old brown jacket that had seen better days, deep scars ran down the side of his face, crossing his cheek, jaw, and neck. One of his eyes was duller than the other, and his left arm didn't move as smoothly as the right. To many of the young recruits from other species, he looked broken, unfinished, unworthy. The Alliance had brought together warriors from many worlds to train together in unity. Tall, scaled warriors from Saravan, elegant, blue-skinned fighters from Tyron, strong, four-armed soldiers from Graka, and then there was Paul alone, quiet, scarred. Some of them laughed when they saw him, not out loud, but in hushed voices. Behind his back, "What is that human doing here?" One Tyran whispered. "I heard humans are primitive. Didn't they lose their last war?" Another joked. "Maybe he's here to clean the barracks." A Graken soldier laughed, flexing all four of his arms proudly. Paul didn't respond. He heard it all, but he didn't react. He simply stood in line, followed orders, and did what he was told. Every morning he was the first to rise. Every night, the last to sleep. He cleaned his own gear. He polished his boots. He kept to himself. The third day of training, they were ordered into combat drills. The instructor, an old alien commander named Varish, barked orders in a booming voice. "Pair up. Hand-to-hand combat. Show me what you've got." Paul was paired with a Saravan named Zarek. Tall, muscular, and fast. Zarek smirked as he stepped forward. "You sure you're ready, Scarface?" he asked. Paul didn't answer. He just nodded once. The fight began. Zarek came fast, aiming a spinning kick toward Paul's head. Block it, he ducked and moved to the side. Zarek tried again, this time with a strong jab to the chest. Paul twisted his body, grabbed Zarek's arm, and used his weight to throw him to the ground in one move. The arena went silent. Zarek got back up, shocked. He tried again, faster this time, angry. Paul didn't try to outpower him. He moved with the strikes, using timing and sharp, short movements. In just 30 seconds, Zarek was pinned to the floor. The instructor raised his brow. "Winner, Paul." No one said a word.
Ow.
Even the ones who had laughed before were now watching him with confusion. Later that night in the mess hall, Paul sat alone again. He ate quietly, head down. Some recruits snuck glances his way. A young tyrant girl named Lyra walked over, holding her tray. She looked unsure at first, then sat across from him. "That was impressive," she said. Paul looked up. "Thanks. Where? Did you learn to fight like that?" she asked. Paul poked at his food. "Earth, wars, long ago. Are those scars from battle?" He nodded once. Lyra lowered her voice. "They say humans are too emotional, unstable, not fit for high command. Is it true?" Paul looked her in the eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe we just remember pain more clearly than others." Lyra didn't know how to respond. She sat quietly for a while before standing. "Well, I think you're strong." "Stronger than most of them here?" Paul gave a soft smile. "Strength isn't in the muscles. It's in what you've lived through." In the days that followed, Paul continued to surprise everyone. He wasn't the fastest or strongest, but he was calm under pressure. He noticed things others didn't. He moved like someone who had fought not in training. Simulations, but in real battles, where people didn't come back. During a live-fire drill, one of the Graken soldiers panicked and froze. The shots were meant to be harmless stingers, but they could still hurt. The other cadets shouted at him. Paul didn't yell. He ran through the course, grabbed the Graken, and pulled him behind cover. "You're safe," Paul said simply. "Just breathe." The instructors noticed. Whispers began to spread. Maybe he's not so useless after all. Do you see how he helped the Graken? Those scars? Maybe they're real stories, not just marks. But not everyone liked the change. Zarek, the Saravan warrior Paul had beaten, wasn't happy. He gathered a group and tried to confront Paul in the training yard. "You think you're better than us? Human?" Zarek growled. "You're not. You just got lucky. Ch. Paul didn't rise to the bait. I don't care who's better. Then why are you here? Paul looked him in the eyes. Because I've seen what's coming. None of you are ready, Zarek laughed. Seen what's coming? You sound like a ghost. Maybe I am, Paul replied. But even ghosts know how to fight. That night, Lyra asked Paul what he meant. He told her about the Battle of Ire Station, about how his squad was ambushed by raiders, how he fought for 3 days without backup, how only 2 of them survived, and how he had to drag his wounded commander across frozen terrain, losing part of his face to the cold. That's when I stopped being afraid, he said. Lyra looked at him with quiet respect. They don't understand you yet, but they will. Shrugged. They don't need to. I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to make sure they live long enough to understand themselves. And with that, Paul stood, walking out into the night, his shadow long under the training lights. No. One laughed at him that evening. They just watched him, wondered who this human really was. Training on the Alliance base didn't stop. It became harder, faster, more serious. New drills started every morning before sunrise. Cadets were pushed to their limits. Many began to struggle except Paul. Even with his injuries, he kept going. Every run, every lift, every test, he finished without complaint. And that caught attention. Lyra, the young Tyren cadet who once sat with him, now stayed closer. She trained near him, asked quiet questions, and watched how he moved. Paul didn't speak much, but when he did, his words stayed in her mind. When you feel pain, he told her once during a climb, it's not a sign to stop. It's a signal to keep going. Pain means you're not done yet. Others started noticing Lyra's progress too. It was improving fast, faster than most. And when asked how, she always said, I'm learning from him. Began following Paul during practice. They watched how he wrapped his boots to stop blisters, how he stayed calm in loud drills, how he used broken terrain to his advantage. No one laughed anymore, but the old pride in some species didn't fade easily. We don't need human methods, a Graken cadet grunted one morning. We are strong, by nature. You may be born strong, Paul said without anger, but I learned to survive when everything around me died. Which one do you think lasts longer in real war? The Graken didn't reply. During one of the test drills, cadets were dropped in a wild forest zone. They had to survive for 2 days with no supplies. Most groups wandered, confused, arguing over maps or getting lost. Paul led his small team Lyra, a quiet Graken, and a nervous Saravan straight to shelter. You've done this before? Lyra asked. Paul nodded. Many times. Food first, shelter second. Never stay in open space. His calm made the others feel safe. He found roots they could eat, built a simple rain trap for water, and placed small signals that helped them track their movement. When loud animal sounds came from nearby, Paul told everyone to stay still, not fight. You're not always supposed to win fights, he said. You're supposed to choose when to fight. Their group passed the test with the highest score soon. Even the instructors noticed. Commander Varish called Paul in one evening. The commander was a battle-hardened veteran from the Kaleri species. With green skin and glowing eyes, human, Varish said, you weren't in the original top squad picks, and yet you've become their center, not leading. Them, Paul replied. No, Varish said, but they follow you anyway. Paul didn't answer. Varish leaned forward. We've received reports. A fleet of raiders has entered nearby systems. Their path is unclear. They strike here. This base will be the first target. Paul's face didn't change. Then we need to prepare. I will assign you as temporary field mentor, Varish said. Not an officer, but they'll listen to you. Paul nodded once. I'll do what needs to be done. That night, Paul called a meeting with the cadets who had been watching him. Some came by curiosity. Others came because they trusted him. Lyra stood by his side. Training won't save you, Paul began. Real battles are different. They don't follow rules. They don't wait for you to be ready. A Tyron cadet raised her hand. So what should we do? You learn what matters, Paul said. Your weapon isn't your blaster. Your decisions, how fast you move, who you protect. And when you fight back, he showed them how to build cover out of local materials, how to move quietly at night, how to spot hidden traps. He taught them silent signals. Field surgery, how to keep going even when tired. Over the next days, the whole base seemed to shift. Even those who didn't like humans had to admit something had changed. Paul was making soldiers, not just cadets. Then the warning came. Ships from the alliances. Outer Watch reported a signaled dozens of unknown raider crafts heading toward the base system. Communications were cut. Scouts vanished. And within hours, the emergency sirens rang across the base. All cadets 2 defense points, Varish shouted through loudspeakers. This is not a drill. Oh. Paul didn't panic. He stood, picked up his gear, and called to the others. We go together. Cadets ran to their stations. Defense systems activated. Energy shields hummed across the sky. Officers barked orders. Paul joined his group outside the north wall. Lyra the Graken, the Saravan, and 3 others followed. We're not the strongest team, the Graken muttered. Maybe not, Paul said, but we'll be the smartest one. From the hills above the base, the first ships appeared black, sharp, fast. They dropped metal pods full of raiders. Creatures with heavy armor and burning eyes charged toward the walls. Shots fired. The sky lit up. Explosions cracked the ground. Paul took cover with his team and gave orders calmly. Cover fire. Left. Take high ground. Watch the flank. They obeyed without question. Even when enemy troops pushed hard, Paul's squad didn't break. They fought with control, saving energy, protecting each other. Lyra was quick with her rifle. The Graken held the line. The Saravan used a damaged shield to block blasts. One cadet was hit, his leg burned. Others panicked. Paul dragged him to cover, tied the wound, and handed him a pulse pistol. You're still in this, he said. When a large enemy brute broke through the outer wall, Paul ran straight at it, throwing a flash mine at its feet. The explosion blinded it. Paul jumped on its back and fired point blank at the joint behind its head. It collapsed. Lighter, stared, wide-eyed. Did you know where to hit? 'Cause I've fought worse, Paul said. Reloading. The battle raged on for hours. But Paul's team didn't fall. They held their ground. And others nearby started following Paul's calls too. Even senior soldiers began to echo his words. By the end of the night, the raiders were pushed back. Alliance fighters arrived as backup. The base was damaged but not destroyed. And many said, if Paul hadn't been there, it might have been lost. When the sun rose, the field was quiet. Tired faces looked to one man, the scarred human who didn't shout, didn't boast, but fought. Like someone who had already lived through the worst, Paul stood in silence, watching the horizon. He didn't smile, didn't speak, but the others, now they followed without doubt. After the battle, the Alliance base looked like a wounded beast. Burned walls, broken towers, smoke still floated in the air. Some cadets limped. Others rested with bandages across their arms or heads, but the base still stood. And the cadets still lived. Because of Paul, everyone knew it. They didn't say it out loud at first, but they felt it, the instructors, the senior soldiers. Even the proudest cadets who once made fun of his scars, they all saw what Paul did. He had led a team, like a real commander. He had stayed calm when others froze, and he had survived, just like always. Commander Varish called Paul into the control center. The room was dim, screens still flickering from damage. You held the north wall, Varish said. You saved lives. I did my duty, Paul replied. You did more than that. The cadets trust you. Paul stayed quiet. The council will arrive soon, Varish continued. They want a full report. They may ask you to speak. Paul looked at him. I'm not here to impress councils. Varish gave a small nod and impressed the future. Need more like you. Outside the command center, cadets began forming teams around Paul's style. They didn't wait for orders. They trained on their own. They copied his field drills, used his methods, and practiced night movements. They asked Lyra to teach. What she had learned from Paul. Lyra was proud, but she never acted like a leader. "I just listened," she always said. "You should listen too." Paul spent his time helping quietly. He taught how to read the wind for incoming threats, how to listen to the ground for movement. He made them repeat emergency steps over and over until it became habit. "You don't rise in battle," he told them. "Once you sink to your training, so train well." His words were simple but strong. Everyone remembered them. Soon, ships from the Alliance arrived. Ranking officers, observers, council members. They walked the base with serious eyes, noting the damage and the quick rebuild. One council member, a tall figure with gold robes and silver eyes, asked Varish who led the northern defense. "Cadet Paul," Varish answered. "A human?" the counselor asked, raising an eyebrow. Double quotes, "Yes." "Scarred, quiet, and better than anyone we've seen in 10 cycles." Paul was called into the council room. The others stood when he entered. He didn't wear any medals. He didn't dress up. It's just the same jacket, same calm face, same old boots. "Cadet Paul," the gold-robed counselor said, "we've read the reports. Some say you led the defense like a seasoned officer. Others say you saved over 50 lives. What do you say about that?" Paul looked at him. "I didn't count. I just made sure we didn't lose. You took control without permission. I acted when others waited." The counselor studied him. "You've been called a legend by some of the recruits." "I'm not a legend," Paul said. "I'm just someone who stayed alive when it mattered." The room was silent. "What do you want, cadet?" the counselor finally asked. "A command." "Title? Your own squad?" "I don't want anything," Paul replied. "Just give them a real chance. Don't train them to follow rules. Train them to survive." The counselor nodded slowly. "Perhaps your scars carry more than pain. Perhaps they carry truth." After the meeting, Paul walked back into the training yard. The cadets surrounded him. "What did they say?" Lyra asked. "They'll do what they want," he said, "but we keep training." One cadet stepped forward. "Can you show us how to hold a line when outnumbered?" Another said. "Teach us how you stayed calm when the wall broke." Paul nodded. "Meet me at dawn." The next morning, over 50 cadets stood waiting. Some were the same ones who once whispered behind his back. Now they waited quietly, respectfully. Paul didn't shout. He just began. For the next days, the base became something new. Not just a training ground, but a learning zone. Cadets learned not just how to fire a weapon, but how to think in chaos, how to protect each other, how to move like a real unit. They worked as teams. They trusted their partners. They learned the value of every breath. And Paul watched them. Not like a teacher, but like a guardian. One evening, Lyra sat beside him near the outer wall. The sun was low, and the stars were starting to show. "You changed them," she said. "They changed themselves," Paul replied. "Why do you stay here? You could ask to leave, to rest." Paul looked at the sky. "Because somewhere out there, another fight is coming. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but it will come. And when it does, I want them ready." "You think they will be?" He nodded. "They're already becoming more than I ever was." Lyra smiled. "Then maybe you really are a legend." Paul gave a small laugh. "Legends are stories. I'm still real." But deep inside, he knew something had shifted. Not just in the cadets, but in the galaxy. Humans had once been overlooked, laughed at, pushed aside. Now, because of his scars, his pain, and his will, others looked at humanity with new eyes. Not with pity, but with respect. And for Paul, that was enough. The sky above the Alliance base turned red one evening, not from sunset, from fire. Ships burned in orbit, messages came fast. Outposts near the rim were falling. Raiders who had attacked before were not alone this time. They'd ally stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. The council sent a new order. All cadets with combat experience were to form units and prepare for battle. This was no longer about training. It was war. Paul stood at the center of the briefing room, surrounded by cadets who now looked at him not as a student, but as a leader. Commander Varish pointed to the map. "The enemy fleet is heading for Verka 9, a colony with no defenses. They've already taken 2 stations on the way. Your team will go ahead and hold the colony until reinforcements arrive. Varish turned to Paul. We need you. Paul gave a single nod. We'll go. Lyra stepped beside him. We're ready. The ship that carried them was fast, small, and meant for drops. Inside, Paul stood near the window, watching the stars fly past. Lyra and the others sat in silence, checking gear, checking maps, checking their nerves. A young Graken named Toro looked up. Do you think they'll outnumber us? Yes, Paul answered. Do we have a plan? We survive, Paul said. We protect the colony. We buy time. That's the plan. When they landed, Birkin 9 was quiet. The air was cold. Small buildings stood in a circle near a green hill. Local families watched the sky nervously. Children hid behind walls. Paul and his team moved quickly, placing sensors, building small barriers, setting traps. Paul walked the town with Lyra beside him. This place isn't ready for a fight, Lyra said. That's why we're here, Paul replied. He stopped in front of a small building with a cracked roof. Inside, an older woman held a baby. She looked tired but calm. Is this your home? Paul asked. She nodded. It's all we have. Paul gave a small smile. We'll make sure it stays standing. Hours later, the warning came. At long range. Scanners picked up ships entering the system. Enemy dropships were on the way. Paul gathered his team. This is it. Stay low. Don't waste energy. Move smart. He didn't give a long speech. He didn't promise safety. He just made sure everyone knew their job. When the first enemy ship landed, dust and wind filled the air. Armored figures stepped out larger than before, more organized. They spread fast, heading for the colony walls. Paul crouched behind cover with Lyra and Toro. Wait, he whispered. Let them move closer. The enemy walked through the outer fields. They didn't see the traps. Small explosions knocked them back. Smoke filled the air. Paul's team opened fire from the sides. Fall back to the second point. Paul called. They moved quickly, leading the enemy into narrow paths where only two could walk at once. More traps, more cover, more smart fighting. Paul moved like a shadow, quiet, focused. He covered fallen cadets. He pulled wounded back. Even when shot in the leg, he kept moving. You're hit, Lyra shouted. Later, he said. Hours passed. The enemy kept pushing. Paul's team was tired, low on ammo, low on time. A voice came through the comms. This is command. Reinforcements delayed. Hold your ground. Paul didn't flinch. We hold. Inside one of the small homes, Toro was helping a family escape through the back. He looked out the window and saw a large enemy brute heading straight toward the town center. Paul. Toro yelled through comms. We have a big one. Looks like a leader, Paul answered. Buy me 10 seconds. He ran across open ground, limping but fast. Lyra followed, covering him from behind. They reached the center and stood face to face with the massive enemy leader. Its armor was thick, its weapon heavy. But Paul didn't hesitate. He threw a flash mine, blinding the brute. Lyra fired a shot at its leg. Paul jumped on its back and used a shock blade to strike the neck joint as the brute roared, throwing him off, but the damage was done. Lyra fired again. This time it fell. The enemy forces paused. Without their leader, their movements became slower, weaker. Paul shouted, Now! Push forward! The cadets charged, forcing the invaders back toward their drop points. Hours later, the sky lit up with Alliance ships arriving. The enemy ran. The battle was over. The colony still stood. When it was safe, Paul sat down near the small, cracked roof home. His leg was bleeding. His hands were shaking. But his eyes were calm. The woman with the baby walked over. You saved us, she said. Paul looked at the child in her arms. No, he said. We just gave him more time. The council arrived 2 days later. They inspected the battlefield. They spoke with locals. They saw the fallen traps, the smart moves, the teamwork, and they asked one question. Who led this defense? Every answer was the same. The human, the scarred one. One officer looked at Paul and said, Your name will be remembered. Paul replied softly, Names fade. Actions don't. That night, as stars filled the sky, Lyra sat beside him. "Do you ever feel proud?" she asked. Paul looked at the distant lights above. "Not proud," he said, "just ready for the next." 1. The colony of Verkanine had been saved, but the war was far from over. Days later, reports came in fast. Tsunami ships were gathering in large numbers. Not raiders this time, but something worse. Old enemy clans from the edge of the galaxy were forming a massive alliance. They had seen the humans win. They were angry. They wanted to crush the growing hope before it spread. Paul and his team returned to the main alliance base. It was rebuilt now, stronger, but fear still hung in the air. Many cadets had seen real battle for the first time. Some were scared, some were changed. Paul didn't rest long. The council called him again. He stood before them in the same old jacket, still carrying the scars on his face and body. "The enemy is coming for this base," one officer said. "They believe if they destroy us, the smaller colonies will fall easily." Paul nodded. "Then we don't let them take this base. We'll evacuate the top officers," the counselor said. "But someone must stay behind. Hold the line. Delay the attack." Paul didn't even hesitate. "I'll stay." Lyra stood. Up in the back of the room, "Me too." Then Toro, "I stay." Soon more voices joined. One by one, the cadets who had trained under Paul, those who had once laughed at him, now stood beside him, ready to fight. The council looked at them. "You understand this might be your last stand?" Paul spoke clearly. "We understand. But this is our ground now. We won't run." Preparations began immediately. Paul organized the base like a commander. He didn't wait for orders, he gave them. "We split into 3 squads," he said. "Defense lines, fallback points, last. Stand zone." He trained them harder than ever. Every hour counted. He showed them how to use broken ships as cover. Okay, how to create choke points. Okay, how to build traps that would slow the enemy down. He walked the walls every morning and every night, checking every weak spot. He didn't care about medals. He cared about survival. One night, Lyra found him standing alone, looking at the sky. "Do you think we'll win?" she asked. Paul took a deep breath.
I know.
"Not in the way people think. But if we make them bleed, if we show the galaxy what we're made of, then we win." She nodded. "Then let's show them." The warning came 2 days later. Enemy ships, hundreds of them, jumped into the system. Larger than before, faster, heavier weapons. They wanted to erase the Alliance base completely. Paul stood at the gate as the sky filled with red lights. "Remember your training," he told the cadets. "Stick to your groups, protect each other. Whatever happens, hold the line." The first wave hit hard. Dropships rained down. Ground shook. Explosions echoed through the air. Paul moved fast, faster than anyone expected from someone with old wounds. He gave orders, pulled the injured back to safety, and fought like he had nothing left to lose. Lyra held the left flank with her squad. She fired shot after shot, shouting commands just like Paul had taught her. Toro's group managed to trap an entire enemy squad in a narrow hallway and sealed it shut, but the enemy kept coming. As the hours passed, cadets began falling. The wall was cracking. Paul called out, "Fall back to second point." They moved. Quickly, every step was planned. Every corner had traps. Paul's strategies slowed the enemy again and again. But they were being pushed back. He took a hit to the side but kept standing. Blood stained his jacket, but his voice stayed strong. "Don't stop. We hold this line." The sky above started to darken, not from the night but from smoke and fire. Enemy ships circled overhead. The base was almost surrounded. Then in the chaos, a large enemy commander appeared twice the size of Paul, wearing armor of black steel, holding a blade that burned red. "Send out your leader." The creature shouted. Paul stepped forward without fear. "You're him?" the creature growled. "The human they speak of?"
Elf.
Paul's hand gripped his weapon. "No," he said. "I'm the one you should have feared before you even landed." 2 charged at each other. It was not a fair fight. But Paul didn't fight fair. He moved low, fast, using the brute's size against him. Every strike was smart, placed on weak points. Every dodge was tight and sharp. The cadets stopped to watch as their mentor fought with everything he had. Paul got knocked down once, twice, but stood again. Then, with one last move, he pulled a hidden blade from his boot and drove it into the enemy's side. The brute fell. The battle stopped for a second. Then Paul raised his hand and shouted, "They fall like any other." The cadets cheered. They fought even harder. And just when the enemy sent their final wave, Alliance reinforcements dropped from the sky. The tide turned. The enemy began to fall. Back Paul stood in the smoke, barely standing, his face bloody, his jacket torn. But his eyes were clear. He had held the line. When the last ship fled, silence filled the base. The cadets, now soldiers, looked around. Their numbers were fewer, but their hearts were stronger. Paul sat on the broken steps of the command tower. Watching the sky, Lyra sat beside him. "We did it," she whispered. Paul gave a tired smile. "You all did it. You're a legend now. You know that?" Shook his head. "I'm just a scarred old fighter. The real legend is what you all became." The battle was over, but the scars remained. The Alliance base stood, half broken, but still alive. Smoke rose from the ground, ships hovered above, and med drones flew across the ruins, carrying the wounded. The cadets, now real soldiers, moved slowly through the field, helping the injured, collecting supplies, burying the fallen. And Paul sat alone at the edge of the wrecked command tower, his jacket soaked in blood, his left leg wrapped in bandages, and his hands resting on his knees. He was alive, but he was tired. Lyra approached quietly. Her arm was in a sling, her uniform torn, but her eyes shined with pride. "The council's coming," she said. Paul didn't look up. "Let them come. They want to speak with you." He took a deep breath. "They'll speak with the new generation, not with me." Lyra sat beside him. "You changed everything." Paul gave a soft chuckle. "I didn't change anything. I just showed them what survival really looks like." Ships landed near the center of the base. High-ranking officers and council members stepped out. They were greeted by the cadets, now heroes of a battle no one expected them to win. The council walked slowly through the ruined base, watching the young soldiers salute, watching the broken walls, the traps, the smart battle positions. They listened to the stories. Stories about the scarred human who stood when others fell. Stories about how he moved through fire, gave orders, fought the enemy commander one-on-one, and never gave up. Commander Varish stood with the council. He had heard every report. He had seen the change. "Where is he?" one of the counselors asked. Varish pointed. "Over there, where he always is." Watching the edges, the council walked to the command tower. Paul looked up as they arrived. He didn't stand. He was too tired. But his eyes met theirs with calm strength. The gold-robed counselor, the same one who once questioned him, stepped forward. "You were not chosen to lead," the counselor said. "But you did." Paul didn't answer. "You were once laughed at for your scars. Well, those same scars are written into the memory of this victory." Paul looked at the field around him. "Others died for this. Don't forget them," the counselor nodded. "We won't." "Good," Paul said. "Then I've done my part." The council offered him honors, medals, titles. They asked if he wanted to command his own ship, lead his own unit, train at the academy. Paul shook his head. "Not made for speeches or ceremonies. I'm made for battle. But even battles have to end someday." He stood slowly, using a broken piece of metal as a cane. "Give them the future," he said, nodding toward the cadets. "They earned it." The council watched him walk away. Not many words were spoken after that. Days passed. The story of the battle spread across the galaxy. Colonies told tales of the scarred human who didn't give up. Alliance news networks showed images of Paul leading the charge, of cadets standing strong, of a broken base that held against impossible odds. He became more than a soldier. He became a symbol. Other species who once mocked humans now studied their tactics. Old empires who ignored Earth now opened communications, and young warriors from many worlds asked to train under the same program that made Paul Dot. New division was built, named the Scar Line. It trained soldiers not just for skill, but for survival. Its motto was simple: strength is what remains when pain is done. And Paul, he disappeared. Some said he returned to Earth. Some believed he joined a small colony on the edge of known space. Others believed he died from his wounds and didn't want a funeral. No one truly knew, but Lyra knew. 1 year later, she stood in front of a class of new cadets. Her uniform was clean now. Her badge read Instructor Lyra. Today, she said, we talk about the Battle of Verkanine, about a man who taught us how to survive, how to fight smart, and how to protect each other. One young cadet raised his hand. Was he really covered in scars? Lyra smiled. Yes. Each one. From a different battle. And each one carried a lesson. Was he really that strong? He wasn't the strongest, Lyra said. But he was the last one standing, and that's what made him a warrior. Another cadet asked, what happened to him? Out the window. Some say he became a legend. Others say he just walked away. The class was silent for a moment, then she said, but I'll tell you one thing. They laughed at his scars once. Then the whole galaxy watched him walk into legend.